Hello and a happy solstice.
You too. I love this time of year. It's always so much fun. It's usually very intense.
Especially around the holidays, which just usually creates more challenges for people. Not more, but it can be more challenging, especially if people, get focused on I guess, the physical aspects, like the gift giving and that versus hey, this is a time to rejoice and celebrate. The solstice is the return of the light, and that's a huge,
Yes.
huge thing to really recognize.
I love the return of the light because that's essentially what it is, and it's like the holidays. We don't celebrate the real, meaning of it. We've gotten so far away from what that is. And it's fun to come back and remember and, really be in the moment with what it should be.
It totally is, and we all have that choice. What do we, anything that we get presented with in our life, we have a choice as to are we going to look at this in a negative situation or like a positive situation, love versus fear, whatever
Mhm.
you want to call it. And the holidays, it's one of the highest times of the year where there's a lot of suicides too.
Oh, it's
So you can see that both sides of the coin, or it's the time to get together with family that you may not have seen most of the year, and it can be a beautiful experience. And it really depends on what are you bringing to the table in that scenario, and then realizing other people may not be on the same page. Where it's
so true. I mean,
especially politically, with what's going on, and these people are not. Some people aren't even seeing their families over the holidays just because of politics.
I saw so many families having that situation during Thanksgiving, people posting that they're not getting together with their family because strictly because of a different, belief in a leader. And, what is that, Fred? Like, I had a big family. Now, we don't
Yeah.
come to the table with like 20 of us around the table or whatever. So there's good and bad. I miss it, but at the same time, I don't even have that worry. But I think there's so much pressure that people put on themselves for the holidays, whether
Yeah.
it's keeping in their real feelings. What is it that bubbles up for people?
I think that's an excellent opportunity to look at yourself and what your programs are or what you're experiencing physically, emotionally, mentally in this space.
Mhm.
Because when you amplify the energy of something, it's really going to create that brighter light, which means those shadows can get a lot darker. So
Yes.
it's kind of the bigger picture, like with everything in our life, is how are we perceiving every situation in our existence? Because we do have a choice, to
We
look at
do.
it as a positive thing or a negative thing. And this is a perfect example. I mean, if you can go into a holiday celebration and just celebrate you being in the space with your family and just open that energy up, it also allows other people that may be coming in more fearful or negative based to be able to see that, hey, let's focus on where we're at, set an intention for that. And that's what I think would be great, because that's basically what prayers are before we eat, as you're appreciating this and appreciating that. I think a great thing to do for the holidays would be, to have a little conversation before you even get the whole party started.
Wow. Could
Is
you imagine?
Well, it would be beautiful because it is a reflection of that light returning. And it's like, wow, I can actually interact with my family where I didn't think it was going to be that way because of differences in opinions, but still be
Mhm.
able to put that aside. We are all different. Man, there's not two people on this planet that think the exact same thing about everything in the existence. What food you eat, what colors, what shows, anything. It's not possible, really, and it's not supposed to be that way. We want the variability, we want the selection of a choice. It's like a buffet versus this is what you're going to eat.
Yeah. And we're at that time where solstice is really the ending and the beginning. So it's such a beautiful time to be conscious about this, create a new way. Like, and we always talk on this podcast about doing something that's completely the opposite of what you would
Yeah.
typically do. So, like, how
Yes.
about approaching this holiday just for fun? Like, be
Yep.
adventurous about it. Do something. You don't have to do the whole night the whole way different, but like have some interactions that are completely, number one, I think opening up your heart to not expecting this person to show up the way that maybe you have in your mind they're going to show up. So if you're neutral about that, you're already setting, a framework for a better potential conversation.
It does. Expectations are everything.
It
because
is.
that's what really can be distracting or damaging to us if we expect things to go a certain way and it doesn't go the way that we expect it to go. And
Hmm.
look, you can look back at the history of your life. When have things really ever gone the exact way that you wanted them to go?
It's true.
It's a very small percent probably versus, the bulk of it, which is, wow, I didn't expect it to go this way, but it could be even better than what your
Hmm.
expectations are. So expectations are all about control,
Yes.
if you really think about it. And so the challenge with expectations is if they're not met, how are you going to react to that situation? Do you see it as a victim state? No, it didn't go the way that I wanted it to go. Or is it like, wow, maybe there's something better for me to learn from in this experience that I wasn't able to see or expect?
Yeah. And I had done a post today about the empath narcissist kind of relationship and how it's a game. It's not that the narcissist is superior and the empath is, this highly sensitive, inferior, victim like, person. You're both in it to validate love for your own reasons. And it's a perfect match
Oh,
because
it is.
of the game that's played, right? So I just bring that to light today because every relationship could have, if you're not in the right balance, you can be on one of those spectrums. Like the narcissist really being the bullying, really in your head, egocentric, whereas the empathic person maybe being too much in the heart, feeling what everybody else is feeling, and there's a lot that comes into play. Say you're approaching a holiday dinner and you're highly empathic, you're going to feel what other people's hesitations are before you even get to that event, right? It's going to start impacting you. So I think it's really important. Maybe we talk just a little bit about how to protect your own energy field and the boundaries, maybe the healthy boundaries you can put in place just as you approach these situations.
Yeah, I think boundaries is a good word for it, versus the protection thing. Because
Right.
there's a huge energy difference in my mind where this protection means that you think you have to like fight something that's out there. Versus
Yes.
boundaries just allow you to still see what's going on around you negatively, but not take it on. It literally is something that's kind of stopping it so it doesn't become yours. And a
Hmm.
lot of times even with protection, and I remember even in my theta training, um, Viana was stating, like, what do you people think you're doing out there when you put your bubbles and your shields up? It's like all you're really going to end up doing is calling things in to justify the need to put your bubble and your shield up. It's a
Yes.
different mentality than what has been um, spoken and experienced a lot in the like, a spiritual mentality, a spiritual community, is we need to protect ourselves. And it's like, to me, it's all about the moment is if you are in the moment and things don't feel good to you, it's that instant message of what is going on in my existence versus, oh my God, I have to push this away. Because it is a learning experience. It's why they call narcissists dark angels. They will show you everything in your existence where there's an imbalance of more fear than love.
Yes. And a
Just
lot of
subtle.
people have been asking about like how to navigate panic attacks right now. And I think it's a great because as I stopped to give some of my advice on a forum about that, and I was saying, I think breathing is definitely our best, medicine. But I know I've seen people in a full blown panic attack, right? And they're not able to stop and focus on their breathing when
Yeah.
you're that far in. So, at the root cause, we know it's a fear, typically, a trauma that's buried. Something rubs against that. It's also your adrenal glands, your nervous system's been rattled, you're just in fight or flight.
Yep.
Anything coming up for you to help people that maybe are in some panic attacks right now?
It's funny. The breathing was the first thing that popped into my mind, and just as you were talking, I was just like sitting here, and I just had this long exhale that just naturally happened as you were talking. But you're right. When you're in the throes of it, sometimes it's hard to focus on that breathing energy because it's like you're in fight or flight. You'll breathe, which is probably the reason why you're in a panic attack. Is you're really not breathing. You're not
You're not.
allowing things to be let go. Is to exhale these energies or if it's something where you see a pattern, I know a lot of times people will have like touchstones, like a little crystal or something that they can hold. And it really is just distracting the mind from the
Mhm.
situation to have you look at something differently, which kind of pulls you out of that space a little bit.
Yeah, just that soothing. It's almost like a pacifier for a baby, you know, it's
Totally.
gonna calm you. So that's something to have in mind. I know even with children, they've been advised if they're in school to have something in their pocket or
Yep.
you know, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's just awareness, like knowing what might trigger you, just preparing yourself mentally for, you know, being in, like if you start to feel your shallow breath, just taking deeper breaths. It's so interesting when I go on my walks, I find myself just like exhaling a lot. And
Yeah.
it's like I think because I'm just like I don't wear, you know, my earbuds or anything like that. Like I just go on and I'm one with nature and I my body takes that time just to really get the breathing that, you know, my nervous system likely needs.
Breathing is fascinating if we really truly think about breathing because most of it's unconscious,
Yeah.
to where we're not thinking about breathing. Our body just naturally does it. And it's one of the only energies, which to me is when we can take the external environment and then internalize it, is through our breath. It's really one of the only things that we can do. We can visually see things, but then it gets converted to an electrical impulse. Versus breathing is they call it the breath of life. And there's so much energy associated with breathing and even the lungs, because that's the expansion. So I think what may kind of help people with anxiety is if they practice deep breathing energies or cycles.
Mhm.
That way it can become something that the body has available to it that it can unconsciously go to when people are in those heightened states.
Yes. And you can even count like an inhale for 4, then pause for 2. And I like to do like a longer exhale, like an exhale for
Yep.
6. Like you could be sitting at the dinner table and just do that, not deeply, but like no one would even know. So I fully agree. I mean, when I've done some breathing meditations, like my whole body will tingle. Like it just activates the life force in us. It's truly everything.
It really is. And if you want to look at the chemistry behind it, the biology behind breath work, I mean, if people ever had a breath work session, it feels intense. Like you can, like I know when I would do breath work, my body would like almost freeze. Like I
Yes.
couldn't move a muscle, and then I would feel this tingling sensation. And it's almost like you're unconsciously just breathing in this deeper cycle. And what triggers that has to do with DMT.
Mm.
Every living thing produces DMT. Every cell produces DMT. The lungs produce the most DMT of any of our organs. So when you're focusing on expanding the energy of the lungs and changing its automatic pattern, it increases DMT into the bloodstream, which then can open up those neural pathways. It's like a mini ayahuasca journey, is what it really comes down to.
It's so beautiful. I think we can change anything in our body. It's just a matter of changing the frequency. And I remember I just happened to be very relaxed on the sofa one day and did one of those breathwork meditations and I went fully into that. Like I felt
But
numb at first. My body, like I felt like I was pinned to the sofa for about 15 minutes. Full on, every part of me was like rushing tingly like and I just called in the most amazing healing at that moment. Like, and I just feel that forever changed me that day. Like, you
okay,
know, these are the things sometimes you enter into these states completely unexpected. Like, I once had a Kundalini experience on a Reiki session one time. It was like never planned, you know, but we can have these moments and there's so much to explore with what is, you know, what are the ingredients like breath
yeah.
or, you know, infused water. You know, I just saw you drink some water because like we are all water. So like
Yeah.
sometimes it's beautiful to bring rather than going out into the void in a meditation, come in like see your body liquefying almost with the water that it is, then heal everything and come back to your form. I mean, it's so fun to play with.
I'm glad we're bringing this up because this is something I used to do. That sometimes, we have these patterns and then we kind of shy away. We miss a day or two and then it gets lost. Was I
Hmm.
used to do the Wim Hof breathing method?
Yes.
And there's like you can go on YouTube. There's probably millions of deep breathing meditations, and find what
Hmm.
resonates with you. That's the bigger thing too, is for me, that was a nice little 10, 12-minute meditation, where he's guiding you through the process so you don't have to think about
Yes.
what to do. But there's so many different ones out there, and there may be one that you use that you could share too that may
Yes.
resonate with certain people or it may not.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just the different breathing techniques seem to unlock something in us that when things get unlocked in us, like
Yeah.
it's such a game changer. And that's in, all the sessions that we do. It could be just a trapped emotion. You just don't know when something really big gets uprooted until then you feel it.
Yeah. Even going back when I was where I'm at now, like 15 years ago, when I was kind of like just discovering what was going on in my life, because I went through divorce and I'm like, everything I thought I should do just changed. So I was
Mhm.
like, what? I need to look at something different. So I started looking at breathing patterns. And I think the
Okay.
one that I was looking at was like a 4 count. You breathe in for
Mhm.
4, you hold for 4, you exhale for 4, you wait for
Mhm.
4, then you inhale again. I mean, but
Yeah.
there are all so many different ways that you can do this. And that's what you need to find out what feels good to you and have
Yes.
fun with this and practice and playing. And it evolved into a pattern to where I would see how long can I really go through the cycle of a breath, which is
Mm.
inhale as slowly as I can, hold for as long as I can, release, exhale for as long as I can, and then wait in that still point state where there's no breath, and before you start to breathe back in again.
Yes.
And it was fascinating to me because when I first started, it was maybe 20, 30 seconds because your body's just not used to that cycle.
Mhm.
Now I can easily go for over a minute just with one single breath cycle. Every now and then I'll test myself because I'm like, man, I haven't done that in a while. Can I do that?
Yes.
So I'll just set a little timer just because my brain likes to play. I like to play with different
Yeah.
things and it's still there, but thank you for bringing that up again with the breath because I realize that is a great way to kind of start out your day. And I know a lot of people that will start out doing a mini breath work session and it really will open up and expand and open up your pineal gland and things will start coming through that may not have been there before because those neural pathways are being opened up with that increased amount of DMT.
Hmm. And you bring up play, which is something I've been more conscious of, especially around the holidays. It's fun to like befriend, I guess, our inner child again. So let's talk a little bit. So our inner child, in my opinion, it holds a lot of the traumas,
It
if
holds
not all.
all of it. It's the
Yeah,
beginning.
it's
It's the
all.
beginning of it.
Say it's by the age of 5. So say your inner child, 5 years old. Just starting to spend some time daily with the inner child. And I once heard it phrased, what if for the inner child the best day of the year is your birthday, right? So what if you said every day, this is your birthday. You woke
Yeah.
up and you said, "Good morning, inner child. It's your birthday today. What do you want to do? What's the one thing we can do together?" Right? And what if you approached every day and started to build that relationship with the inner child? And you went out into the world like a child and had wonder and excitement about like what you were going to do. There are studies to prove that people really start reverse aging at that
Yeah.
point. There's so much to be tapped in with
Mhm.
working not only from a trauma standpoint with the inner child, but bringing play and creativity and imagination back. I
It's
just think it's
vital.
beautiful.
It's really because you're right. Because if you think about just how our brain develops, the first 7 to 8 years, I usually call the first 7 to 8 years the inner child. Just
Okay.
from what I've experienced, and this is just my perception on this,
Yes.
is because that's those first 7 to 8 years is when that child's brain is in a dominant theta brainwave when they're awake and conscious.
That's
And then
true.
when their hormones start kicking in, and then the cerebral cortex starts to form, that's when they drop out of that dominant theta state, and that's when they're
Mhm.
more in alpha or probably beta. But those first 7 to 8 years, that's where your brain has created those foundations of your programs that are going to create things for you for the rest of your life until you're able to identify what that is. So if you think about it from an energetic perspective, is the first 7 to 8 years of your life dominant theta, and your brain is absorbing all these programs, which are usually more fear than love, because
Mhm.
that's kind of what we're here to resolve is to find love in the face of fear.
Yes.
So we need to be programmed with imbalanced programs that are reflecting more fear. And what may feel like trauma to a child may not seem like trauma to an adult at all. But
Great point.
that's the experience of what a child is knows to exist. So then when that cerebral cortex and they're about dropping into beta, is that's where they start that thought process, is where they're starting to reflect on what's going on around them, what's being created externally. But the brain really isn't at a capacity at that age to be able to fully understand, at least from what we're aware of. I think these younger generations are,
Hmm.
because they're just at a higher vibration, than what
Yes.
we have been, when we were born 50 plus years ago. So
Right.
it's, to me, that inner child is where all the trauma holds. And then when the conscious mind starts processing things, it almost like puts the inner child in a corner,
Hmm.
because it's like, oh, we're different. Our brain is different. We can look at things differently now. And then your inner child is left holding the garbage and the trauma, while the adult brain thinks that it starts to know everything. And we
Yes.
know, kids, we were the same way. When we get to that 9, 10 age, we think we know everything, but it's
Absolutely.
that deeper reflection of what's going on in the brain. So the inner child gets left holding the trauma, and that's where the inner child can feel like it's trapped. So what you're, mentioning is perfect, is to learn how to play again. That opens up that door and allows that inner child to play in a safe, fun way. And then that's where you can start to identify what some of those deeper programs may be.
Yeah, and from what I gather, and when you do that exercise, you start by like imagining your inner child interacting with you. But what I once heard it explained by someone who was really into doing this, and she said the day I knew it was real was when the inner child like actually showed me a toy that like I didn't imagine, like it was just interacting with me full on, and I was just seeing a whole, relationship build in front of my eyes. So I think that's the beauty of it. Just like fake it till you make it almost like, but whatever you're
Yeah,
seeing from your inner child, that's how we build our psychic abilities. If you're seeing it, it's real. It's not that
absolutely.
you're writing the screenplay of the whole thing. Like, it's coming in front of you for a reason, and then it'll just take on a whole new level of that.
It really is. Think about one of what your favorite toy was as a child, and go
Hmm.
out and buy it. eBay, listen, man, eBay, you can buy anything.
True.
So if there's these older toys, that you really loved as a child, but you never really were able to enjoy it because you couldn't afford it or your friend had it, do this for yourself. Love yourself enough. Just go on eBay, look it up. You can find ones brand new, you can find used ones, whatever you want, and play with that again, because that's going to show the brain to go back to those childhood experiences where it first encountered this toy. And that's how we can also learn how to heal our traumas. Holy shit, that's pretty bad. That just kind
That
of came through,
was
so thank
powerful,
you.
right?
Thank you for
Like,
that.
I just thought about like how cool if we still have some days before Christmas, like if we actually at least purchase something for our inner child that we could unwrap. What a symbol that would be to our
Yeah,
healing journey. Like,
be a
okay,
huge
this
journey.
2025 is going to be a year where we're going to get to know each other again. Because when we were talking about the inner child and you were doing a great job of explaining, pushed in the corner, I think you were saying, like, I was picturing almost like if you leave a dog, like you abandon a dog and you leave it in the house, right?
Yeah,
Or I was seeing a child in the closet and like no one coming to let it out. Or, that's essentially what we're doing when we put all those stuffed emotions and layer them into a closet on top of our poor child who doesn't know how to open the door for them to free themselves. We have to go reparent the inner child again. And
yeah.
so it's something we can't run from doing.
Plus, we don't really consciously remember a lot of the first 5 years of our life.
Yeah.
So I know there are some people out there like, I remember these vivid memories at the age of 2 or 3, and they're like, I remember everything. I'm like, no one remembers everything. I think we
Mhm.
remember what we remember, and we may think that it's everything, but we don't know
Yes.
what we don't know. So if there's challenges in your life, then there's obviously something that you're not consciously aware of. And that's that bigger reflection of not knowing what those first 5 years really are or what may have happened. But you can kind of tell what your programs are going to be by what you recreate later in life. It's just a different time, different place, different person, but it's still the
That's true.
same program.
Yeah, and I did hear when you're about 16 years old, that's where you start rubbing up against those memories, and they're your triggers essentially. So anytime something's coming up in front of you, they pop up at the most inconvenient, times too. And you could be in a full on tower moment because
Absolutely.
you just brought that memory, like perfect scenario to bring it back. But that's how we heal them. They have to be seen that fully. So, what a gift if you have the awareness of that to lean in when we, come upon those, what are
Hmm.
they called? Minefields, that we're
Yeah.
walking through. It's like, boom, it's here. Like, embrace that if you can.
And so when these things come up that trigger you in your life, realize it's just your brain's trying to trace it back to when it started, so then you can consciously see what is unconscious. But if we're in that victim state, and we think something is happening to us, right away we're going to get put into fight or flight. And then we're just going to be reacting to it versus that is present and we are creating this uncomfortable moment because your unconscious wants to be balanced. And it makes sense around the age of 16 because they say that's when the brain starts to stop growing or forming. I've heard 16 to 25. Of
Yeah,
course, it's going to be different for everyone. There's no hard set rule where one day it's your brain's growing and then all of a sudden it just stops. But there's a gradual process to that. So I always call the brain like the IKEA brain. All the pieces are there when you're born. It just takes you 16 years to put the damn thing together.
hmm I was really thinking about some of those biggest traumas we have and seeing like a ball of yarn. And so some of them are so, like, those rubber band balls too. Like, you have so many, you've been through that so many times and it's so tightly, you almost have to like pull each one of them off. And then you have this one moment one day where it just like feels like the ball falls apart, right?
Yeah.
But for anyone out there trying to, maybe on a daily basis, you notice you're up against this big fear of yours, and it just puts you in like ego controls command center, like do this, do that, commanded to you throughout your day, and you don't want to do that anymore.
Yep.
How can we help people really unravel that whole ball?
That's a great question because that's usually like what we'll do when we're working with people is give me an example of what you're experiencing in your life. What situation keeps repeating itself? Because when we see these repeated patterns, it's the same program pre-age 5 that just keeps recreating scenarios to reflect it. So when we're in that space of where we're in that moment, it's like for me, when I work with a client, I'm always like, can you trace that back? What's the earliest memory you can remember where something similar like that happened? And we don't have to go the whole way to pre 5 because we don't consciously remember that. But once we can allow your brain to consciously see the patterning of it, then it's about determining what that simple unconscious program would be. Because our unconscious programs, if they're the majority of them are in place by the age of 5, they're not going to be complex. The brain doesn't have the complexity to understand that. So it's usually a very simple program. And I think a
Yes.
lot of those simple programs are basically whatever our family does with us, our brain unconsciously is going to believe that this is love because we're constantly told families love us genetically. It's in our DNA. They created us. So if there's a lot of abuse, love is abuse is a simple program, but it's a
Yes.
program that a lot of people have. And the abuse can take so many different forms. And it's really not necessary always to dive back in to see what that initial traumatic event is. Some people want to know what that is, especially in abusive situations. And I'm like, do you really want to know? We don't need to know. It's brain candy. But
True.
it can be distracting, and then it can also start to create other traumas. You're like, wait a minute, I didn't realize this person in my family abused me. And you
Yeah.
may not want to know that, and you don't really need to. We just need to find out what that program is that was created and then release it.
It was interesting because I had been raised, in a situation where my mom, had been a drinker at night. Like, she would drink, and she was such a great mom during the day, but then at 4 o'clock, it was like she couldn't handle the internal stress that she was keeping in because she suppressed a lot of emotions. So I had a session once after that, and they said, you have like completely self sacrificed yourself. Like your mom took your power center from like basically when you were born.
Yeah.
And I, to your point, like it was really hard because I worshiped my mom, you know, like I thought she, and when I heard that, it took me some time to process that, to
Yeah.
see, I saw it so differently. But at the same time, I then really wanted to help my inner child because I was like, look, you've been giving. And it was obvious it was not going to end well. You know, like there was no amount of giving. I couldn't rescue her. You know, I
Mhm.
never did rescue her. She ended up passing. And, you know, I believe a lot of it was that dis-ease inside of her that, you know,
Sure.
propelled her to do those things. But anyway, you know, once you know the self-sacrifice, which I think is big, I'm thinking about, you and I had talked about the three R's: the rejection, regrets, and resentments.
Yep.
There's some core programs for everybody that will unravel that ball. I bet you there's not that many. Like when you take the, I was working with, given your advice, I worked with the rejection. And that really comes into I'm not worthy,
Yeah.
which I think is really, you go down that funnel. I am worthy is like really at the bottom for most of
Yep.
us, you know? So maybe that's, and then the other thing that I'm recognizing is that our thoughts are getting us in trouble with our healing. We really know that we want to remove these programs, but it's the feeling that does the healing, right?
Yep.
So to your point, like we don't need to know all the thoughts. We don't need to do, that's why talk therapy is like really not where it's at anymore. It had its own purpose,
Hmm.
but it's like the ladder rung, like it's not really getting to the root cause with talk
No.
therapy because you're not getting to the feelings.
And there is an importance to, I think, for people to be able to talk in a safe space. But if you're
Yes.
just letting them talk about their traumas over and over and over again, you're really just reinforcing them.
Yes.
To me, like most of my sessions, it's like that's why I have two ears and one mouth. Like the majority of the time, the client's talking because I want them to start talking. But
Yes.
it's with an intention that the talking is going to show us what those unconscious programs are, because it's your unconscious that creates your thoughts and
Hmm.
therefore what you say. So there's magic to it, if it's followed up and not just left hanging.
Yes.
So that's that bigger part. And talk out loud to yourself, walk yourself through these processes, but have an endpoint to where you're like, what kind of program would be creating these scenarios? And that's where you can find that deeper healing. And you're right, the heart is where the magic happens. Because
Yeah.
the head, it's always about the head heart connection, which we hear a lot, but I don't always hear it defined very well as what is that head heart connection. Heads are the programs. This is limited up here. The brain only knows what it knows. The
Yeah.
heart has to do with the emotional and the receptors that you have on your cells to be able to recognize an emotion. Emotions are chemical reactions. Everything in the body is a chemical reaction. So if we don't have the cells and the receptors to know what true unconditional love is, we can never feel it. We could be in its presence. We may be able to identify it consciously, but if we can't feel it, there's not that head heart connection. And the heart is where that's the power of the emotion. Our emotions show us whether something is a love or a fearful type of experience.
Yeah, and as you were talking, for anybody that just felt that activation, I was seeing the cells and I was just allowing them. A lot of people's cells were turning on just as you were talking there,
Sure, just
Fred.
got
I could
chills.
feel
Yeah.
that. And I was holding the energy for, it was almost like an eye shut, and I could see the eyelashes like lifting and the whole cell
Yeah. Ooh, God,
filled.
those feel good.
I got some cool
Yeah.
visuals with that. There was some massive healing that just took place in giving the attention and love to the cells.
Yeah. It's
That
what a lot of people don't realize that, from a simple perspective. And that's what we do as well, is not just release programs. You can pull programs out all day long, but if you don't know what you're seeking, what it feels like, it's like a language you can't speak. You're never going to recognize it on a cellular level. And that's where I love what the body does for us and what emotions truly are. That's the indicator of which direction are we going. This is just like a GPS. It's just going to do what it's told to do.
Well, emotions are energy in motion too, designed to
There you
be
go.
in motion. So when we are suppressing them or repressing them in the body, they tend to harden into tumors or into things if they're really pushed into a place where there's no, think about it. It's going to get dusted over. Anything you put into the corner of your house and you never go there, it's not going to look pretty in a few years when you find it, you know? And it's really just pulling those things out, holding them, giving them some attention, love, that does the healing.
So the secret, if you want to like look at the secret of a lot of what the challenges are, I think in our existence, especially in the male population, because generally men aren't encouraged to express emotions. Generally, we're not talking absolute by any means, but even just historically, the further we go back, the worse it was. So we're evolving out of that for sure.
Yeah.
Is to you need to experience what an emotion feels like, because if we don't know what it feels like, we can't speak it. So this is where choosing something as a child, going back to that child play, is to learn how it is to play again and to have fun and to experience things. There's certain TV shows or movies that we can watch where we can learn what emotions are. Kids don't like to watch, some kids don't like to watch horror movies because now they understand what fear feels like, versus watching something that would be more funny or more emotional or more romantic, something that opens up that heart space. That's how we can learn to be able to experience new emotions, in addition to just commanding that an emotion is now on your receptor of yourself for you to feel. That's the quantum, easy, simple way, but it's not the only way, and sometimes it's that fun experience of like, flip through the movies, because everything has two aspects to it. Everything can be perceived as good or bad. So if you're watching movies just to distract yourself because you don't want to be dealing with the thoughts and the negative emotions that are coming up, then it's just going to repress and it's going to build. But if you can find something just to watch and say, hey, I want to learn a new emotion by watching this, and a healthier emotion, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
We don't need to be programming receptors for more fear because we have enough of those. We're not here to learn that much as we need to find that flip side of that coin. It's a beautiful little way to play again. Watch some cartoons that you used to like to watch as a kid, whatever that may be, and see what comes up through that experience.
I'm going to share something. It's somewhat personal, but I don't think my girls would care. And just see what comes up for this as an example. So I took two of my girls to shopping today. They're very different, my two daughters that I brought. So the ones they're playing, my one played the song she wanted me to hear first on her phone, I'm like, I'm not liking the background music. It was more rap. I'm like, this is making me on edge. I don't like it. Then my other daughter pulls one up that I really like. It was beautiful. And so she went for two songs, right? Because she was like, it was getting like, I was fine with it. So her sister gets really mad because her sister's singing the song, and it's like beautiful melody in the car. But I think what happened, something was brought up for my other daughter with that song. It was an older song. I think there was a memory there. I could see when I looked at her, her eyes were almost like rimmed with tears. So there was a healing event, Fred, that took place, and it was beautiful, although it was like a weird moment. But there was like, so songs, like that, they can be so powerful and pulling up. I think there was a big healing that took place. There was probably a memory attached to that song.
Yeah.
She really wanted it off, but at the same time, it already had done the healing.
Songs are incredibly emotional, and I think they can be more emotional than like TV shows, because visual is one of our biggest senses. I think it encompasses a lot of the brain, and it takes over a lot of what's going on. So when you listen to something and you can close your eyes, it's going to amplify that auditory aspect of our brain, and it can really open up things that we may not even realize.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have a song that you listen to every time you hear this song, it always brings you to tears, no matter when it is, no matter where you're at? We all kind of have those moments. And it's fun sometimes, because then I'll find myself like listening to it over and over and over again. And I'm like, it almost feels like torture in a way, because sometimes it can bring up some uncomfortable emotions. But I always like to see that, like, crying is something that's involuntary.
It's so beautiful.
It's cathartic. It's how the body is released. It's the body's natural way of releasing something energetically. So
Mhm.
sometimes I'll just keep watching Overgrown and I'll just keep crying and crying and crying. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But it's like, I know it's releasing something. It's connecting the dots between the head and the heart. The head starts to be able to see what's going on there on a deeper unconscious level. You can play with
And
that as
on
well.
both levels, like if you're having a really bad day, play your favorite songs. You cannot be in a bad mood when you start playing your favorite songs,
Yep,
especially if you pick some older ones because the background music was set to like 432 hertz or 528 hertz, which is automatically going to raise your vibration.
totally. Oh, absolutely. It's really kind of cool when you start to get into the depths of these things.
Yeah.
And just how that all ends up like playing out in our existence, especially with music. Music is so powerful.
Well,
One recommendation is I used to like you can set alarm tones. You can now like put music clips into your alarm tones. So I used to always put my favorite song as my wake up alarm. Then I
mhm.
started to hate it.
Oh,
Because
that's true because there's nothing worse than getting up with an alarm. It makes you so mad.
not when you don't want to, or you're going to a job that you don't like and you don't
I
want to
don't
be doing this.
know.
You can see
Yeah,
how you can program that beautiful song, flip side of the coin, to then become something that doesn't feel so beautiful anymore.
completely. Yeah, but all of this just shows that I think we can all agree things are at the surface now. And
Yeah,
it's a beautiful time for healing because you really can't control it. Like for my daughter, like she couldn't control it. That thing was coming out at that moment. And so, just the more when we are in quiet and alone, the more we can release, then we won't have the public experiences of releasing
yeah.
things.
And then you may not have those anxiety or panic attacks too. And so
Yeah.
if people have panic attacks, what I would be looking at is what was going on in in your surroundings, in your environment before the panic attack, because there has to be a trigger. you know,
Completely.
Triggers are true for a reason. If a person gets upset because someone said something to them and they get angry or defiant, it's not because it's not, it's probably because it's true to them, but they just don't want to admit it. The ego steps into that space because triggers exist for a reason. We don't get triggered for everything in our life. So when we do get triggered, there's a learning lesson if you want to go there, if you can step out of that space and not get into that ego battle mode, that comes up with a lot of that, which the next few days maybe people may be getting triggered the next few days.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on the rest of the year energetically?
Oh my lord, I'm just wait. I can't wait. I don't want to like push it aside and say, oh, I can't wait to see what comes in 2025. But the solstice is the key to me. That should be our calendar year. That should be our New Year's. So for me, energetically, as the light is starting to come back each day, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter. That to me is like the creation of the next year, not just through what we would perceive as a calendar that tells us this or that. But I think this is really a beautiful time for us to take ownership of what we do create in our life. And it's a good time for reflection. New Year's resolutions, January 1st. It's funny how that has been implemented into our experience. Is January 1st, you can start a whole new year, which is a beautiful way to look at things. But most New Year's resolutions don't last out of January, because we fall
No.
back into our patterns.
Well, the thing that I think has been, they're there for a reason to do that to us, not to play victim role to the
Yeah,
system. But when you look at resolutions, by the 11th of January, most people are already out of there, say,
yeah,
resolution. But look what you do to yourself. You shame yourself, you guilt yourself, worthless person, you didn't even make it 10 days,
yeah.
like so look at that and do the opposite of that. Like, if you're going to send, I wouldn't set a resolution. I like to think of intentions maybe or
Yeah.
something, but just be aware if you are, creating any goals for the new year, how you treat yourself if you break any part of that.
It's got to be a day-to-day thing. It's like one day at a time. And sometimes I think when we set goals for certain dates, it's twofold. If you reach that goal, sometimes your brain's going to be like, wow, did I set the bar too low? Once again, judging yourself.
Mhm.
Versus if you don't make it, oh my God, I'm a failure. How could I not reach that bar? So once again, it comes down to those expectations. So I'm not a big fan of um, setting dates and goals versus being your day to day moment. Because if you think you need to be this way for 21 days, you just say 21 days is a good way to create a habit, so to
Right.
speak, is if you think that you need to be somewhere for 21 days, you are trying to control your future
Yes.
versus being it into a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis and see what feels good, because maybe there's something that you're creating in that moment that's going to allow you to heal something that this goal is no longer needed for.
Mm-hmm.
It all
Oh
comes
yeah.
down to the expectations.
Well, and trusting the journey too, because there's always like something in place beyond what you're aware of. There's a reason for all
Yeah.
of that.
And it's not bad to set a
Yeah.
goal because it can be like a signpost. It can be some direction to head towards, but just don't
Mhm.
attach anything to it too much. View it as a directional perspective versus a finish line perspective.
It's so interesting. There's so many things that are popping up where, we think we have to go towards a certain finish line.
Yeah.
Whether that's getting a college degree, like you need the degree, right? I'm dealing with my daughter with that. She's transferring schools. I'm like, you don't need to go to college if you don't want to. Like, you can be an entrepreneur. There's many, and I can see that she wants to go that route, but then there's this voice in her head saying, no, you should go to college because you need the degree to get a good job, right? We're breaking all of that right now. We're
And
breaking
we
all of
we
it.
are. We're seeing it. It's not just the same old go to school, get married, have 1.7 kids, the white picket fence or whatever the average would be. It's more about our own unique individualness and what we've come here to experience. Because to me, we all create our own universe. So if we want to bring in what someone else wants to create in their universe into ours, that could be beneficial if it's beneficial for you. But we can't just
Mhm.
make everyone fit into the same mold. That's not what we're here to be doing.
And as parents, I mean, that just happens to all parents at some point. You
Yep.
just, I remember back in the soccer days, like everybody had their kids in too many activities because like that's what you're supposed to do, sign your kids
Yeah.
up for all these things. And even my one that's in high school, she's in student government, all these things because they look good on your college application. It's like we all need to step back and see what we're doing in our life to check a box
Yeah.
versus like, what are we doing because it just feels good? When are we going to be given permission to live just because it feels good? Like, why are people working 5 days in an office and getting 2 days off? Like, oh, don't get me started.
Oh,
It's just
trust
like,
me.
it's time. I had someone approach me, about, the leaders. I shared part of it on another podcast, him not being happy that his neighbor had chosen this leader for our country. And I said, we're in a place where we don't need a leader. We don't need to
Yeah.
appoint a leader. And he's like, oh my God, I've never thought of that. And like, and this is someone pretty, awake. Like
Yeah.
he really, but had not thought about, oh my gosh, we really don't need somebody anymore. And these are the things that I just think 2025 we're gonna get to like bring to life more. Like what if? What if?
And really, if we think about these leaders that are apparently elected and the choices that they make, how many of those choices that they make truly impact you on a day to day basis in your experiences? Not what you think because of what they said or how you feel about the leader. How do their choices truly impact you on a day to day basis? And when you pull back and you look at it, you're going to see that it's really not that impactful.
No.
It really isn't as bad as what we create it to be. Just because a person believes this and they're our leader, oh my God, everyone's going to then believe the same way. It's never been that way. But what we want to get to is if we want to have people that we can have that can guide us through this experience. And if it is focused more on love versus the fear, then once again, a leader isn't there to make choices for you. But if we allow them to make choices and then we change our life and our emotions because of a choice that they make that really doesn't impact us on a day to day basis, all you're doing is creating codependencies.
There's nothing really anymore that a leader could do that would create that codependency for me. Like I just,
No.
you know, I trust so much. I have so much faith in our journey at this point that it's beautiful to be able to surrender. Like, I think thank God for the COVID training. Like we kind of we learned through that, but now it's like whatever's thrown out. The good news is I'm seeing a lot of people question a
Yep.
narrative now if it's thrown out there. So I see the progress our collective has made, and it's just going to get better from here.
Everything can be a learning experience if you want to look at it that way. But if you get too wrapped up emotionally, get triggered, fight or flight, beta brain, you're just going to be repeating your patterns. It's just that simple. If we didn't have technology to the point to where we could see what's going on almost anywhere on the planet through the internet, everything has both sides to it. The internet is beautiful because we can do things like this and we can communicate, interact with people on a global basis.
Yeah.
But if we start allowing everything that we see online to then we now make it ours, even though if we didn't have technology or we didn't have TV, we would have no clue what's going on out there, and it still wouldn't be impacting your day-to-day existence anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the bigger picture with it, just because someone's making a choice out there, would you even know what that choice is on a day-to-day basis? Would it be impacting you? And yes, there may be certain things that could, but it's not an all or nothing thing. It's usually very minute, these massive choices that can impact us. And if it does impact you in a major way, well, then that's a lesson for you to look at your programs that are creating something that don't feel good to you.
Yeah, we can change the frequency of anything and raise ourselves up, So, whatever, I just keep bringing up frequencies because I see the emotional scale a lot, and it's pulling ourselves out of the fear and just finding your way to peace. And then you can reach for faith and just not knowing what's going to happen, but just getting excited again, bringing the childlike wonder back. Let's see what this is. Let's see how this plays out. It can be fun and exciting. So, I just encourage people to get excited about what's to come
Yeah.
because we've been waiting for this time. It may look like, why would you even say that? But like we truly have been waiting for this time.
This is it. I mean, where we're at in this moment, this is where we're at for sure. And everything that we've experienced in our life has led us to this point. And that's what we're here. And that's why I think the 9-year 2025 is a big end of a cycle. And we're seeing it on a global scale. We're seeing it on a national scale, on a local scale, where people are starting to look at things differently. And that's where we learn through these experiences, is through looking at something in a different lens and seeing what it feels like to us.
Mm.
Wow. So what would be a good healing that we could do with this? There's like
That's
so
what I was
many
thinking.
things.
Yeah,
I like the inner child one, to be honest with you.
me too.
And what we could really look at doing, and this is just, and you can add what you've experienced too, is what I've seen more than anything when it comes to programs and emotions associated with the inner child, is a lot of people have an energy where their inner child hates them because their
Mm.
inner child was just thrown in the corner once their brain started thinking that it knows everything. And then in
Yes.
construct, which could also be there, is that not only does our inner child hate us, that we may believe that we hate our inner child because that's where all the trauma started. So we may be
Wow.
blaming our inner child for the traumas that are recreating in our existence. So they may be the programs, but the emotion is to know what it feels like to unconditionally love and be loved by your inner child.
That's so beautiful. I just thought of teenagers. If you have a teenager who's like, oh, that person doesn't like me, they're going to avoid any interaction with that person, right? If we're doing that with our inner child, that can be so detrimental. And essentially, that is what we're doing.
It's basically it's an autoimmune issue. You are
Yeah.
attacking yourself,
Yes.
energetically. A lot of I see with autoimmune issues are just anger and hatred towards you as a person, which can be reflected through the inner child. Well, it's going to start with your inner child, and then it gets expanded into your adult self that you now don't like. Yeah, same program, just a
It's
different face.
definitely for those people out there, if that resonates at all, like hating yourself or being angry with yourself, especially at a subconscious level, let's definitely call in that healing today. Just offering a lot of forgiveness, I
Yes.
think acceptance, forgiveness. Like as you think about judgment, the flip side of that is, forgiveness, I think, acceptance, then that unconditional love.
Yeah, and we can also release the 3 R's: the resentments, regrets, rejections, and grudges. The grudges are just a resentment that's now put into motion, so to speak. It's
Okay,
like,
yeah.
I'm not going to pick this phone up because I don't like this person. That's a resentment that now becomes a grudge. when we can release those three associated with our inner child and how we even view ourselves as an adult through judgment or hating ourselves for whatever reason, it's the same kind of process, and it can really complete that puzzle really, really beautifully. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and just one more thing before we do the healing. If anyone wants to pause the video at this point and do the exercise where you write down some of your resentments, your rejections, your regrets or grudges, anything that comes to mind, you don't need a lot, but whatever
Yep.
comes to mind, and just allow this healing that we are about to move through to remove that for you. Like that will free up so much space during this holiday season for love to come back.
So if you're going to pause this and make your list of the three R's, and sometimes it can be challenging. Like, I don't know what I mean by, like, what do I resent? What do I feel angry towards? Or where do I feel rejection? Or who did I reject? Or what situation did I feel this rejection in? And then also the regrets. Like, what did I regret doing? What do I regret not doing?
Yes.
The one thing I even mentioned with you is the two things that I always recommend people put on each one of those lists is yourself,
Mm-hmm.
because that's that self-judgment, rejecting ourselves, thinking that we're not good enough, or regretting that we're not who we think we should be. And then
Yes.
also what we would call God, whatever we call these religious energies of a being outside of us, is it's ingrained in our DNA. So it may not be vital for this existence in this lifetime, but I can tell you it's in the human DNA to where we've been worshiping a judgmental God that's outside of us. So I always like to tell people, put you and God on that list. And listen, you do not have to share this list with anyone.
No.
That's the thing I love about this exercise is this is for you. And
Mm-hmm.
you can pause it, or you can just watch the rest of this go through the healing. You can come back, watch it again, and just fast
Exactly.
forward to the healing part. You can continually use this. This is a tool. There is no space or time, and that's why this is so magical that we're able to do this at any time that we choose to.
Yes, the energy is encapsulated in this. So that is such a, if we were live right now, it wouldn't matter if you watched on the replay. You're all going to get the replay, but just
Yeah.
know that like anytime you play this, your intention was to watch this because you are watching it. So your intention
Yeah.
is contained in the healing right now. You've already put yourself in that healing sacred container.
Perfect example that we already talked about, music. You can listen to a song at any time and it still recreates the emotion.
True. I love that example.
So that's a picture perfect example of what we're talking about. Is just on a different level, but it's still the same energy that how we can consciously see that it's possible.
Yes.
Whew, I'm getting chills already, man. This is going to be
No,
big.
it feels a lot. I've been working with it all week a little bit too, so it's really feeling big for me.
All right, so inner child, you have that unconditional love for self to know what it feels like to love and be loved by your inner child, as well as your adult self, your true self. Forgiveness and compassion for all of these experiences, releasing resentments, regrets, rejections, and grudges with people. Forgiveness is huge, making sure that we're providing forgiveness for those people that may have created these traumas in our existence. Because
Mm,
if it happened, that's what we signed up for. So we can't blame a person for playing the role that we wanted them to play, especially our parents.
yeah.
All right. So find that beautiful, happy, safe place if you got one, or just anything that feels good, any toy you want to play with, and let's go have some fun.
Did that bring up emotion for you?
Just a little.
I felt this exactly. I mean, so much with my inner child. That was
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah, I just saw like a little child sitting in the corner. It just didn't feel safe to come out and play.
Mhm.
It was just like going up and grabbing their hand. It's like, hey, we can play now.
Yes.
It's almost like hide and seek. Our inner child is hiding from us, because it doesn't feel safe. Wow.
I saw my little 5-year-old self in this beautiful little red dress, and she was coming to sit at the dinner table. My grandmother used to set a table. There was like 30 of us with all my cousins. And she was like, "Is there really a chair for me?" She said, "Can I really sit here with you?" And it was just like, gosh, that same emotion of like being invited back into my life.
Versus having the kids' table. You get to sit with the
I
adults.
did that too. Yes, so it's interesting you bring that up. But yeah,
And
it
it's funny
felt,
you mentioned red, because first in my head first went to chakras, because
I
color of a
love
dress
that.
is important. And if you
Yeah,
think about Christmas being red and green, red's the sacral where most of our traumas are held in that general area.
or
It's
the
the
root.
power, the
Yeah,
control. Yeah, and the root, that's true, the root would be there too. And then green is the heart space.
beautiful.
So it's kind of neat to make that connection. And root is safety. That
It was
is the
all about
safety.
safety, that encounter I just witnessed. That was so
Wow.
beautiful. So pull out a picture if you have yourself at those, 5 to 8 year old age. Put it on your mirror. Just, start there. Start looking
Yeah,
at who you were. Look into the eyes of that photo. I had all of my girls find a picture of themselves at that age, and they chose their favorite picture. And it's just, even if you're just looking at that self that you were, there's healing taking place. You know?
absolutely. That's a big thing. And also own that what that 5-year-old went through and still survived and could thrive even in spite of those existences. Plus
Yes.
knowing that we chose going in that this is going to be not fun, for the first 5 years of our life. It's not going to be all just play, play, play. It may be, but generally that's not what we're hearing and that's not what we're experiencing. So give yourself some credit and the courage that it takes for a 5-year-old to go through this experience.
Oh, yeah. That conditioning starts so early. And
Yeah,
yeah, the amnesia aspect of it all is just important to remember. We are so brave to commit to diving into this world with forgetfulness and finding our way back and remembering. And so I hope this podcast really helps you remember and to understand the mix of, processing the way Fred and I do, and then getting into your heart and really feeling the power of, an alchemy session, which is what this feels like to me.
absolutely. And make it yours. You know what I mean? Because that's your uniqueness. Own that uniqueness and use what these little tools that we have is to me, I see them as almost like generic because then we can make them our own, fine tune it to what feels best for you.
Yeah,
All
beautiful.
right.
Well, thank
Wow.
you. I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season, and I'm excited to see what 2025 brings.
Yeah, we got one more to do before the end of the year, so to speak. So it'll
Yeah,
be pretty fun. It'll be after Christmas, so to
it
speak.
will
So
be
it'll be
fun.
yeah, it'll be kind of neat to see like what does come up over the next week on a massive scale and also individual and personal to see what we can do to kind of prepare for this beautiful existence and a beautiful late year of clarity that we're coming into.
Yes.
All
Alrighty.
right. Thank you,
Thank
everyone. Happy
you.
holidays.
Bye.